Hello, welcome to the Q&A Café. We're doing something we've never done before. In 13 years of doing the show, we're actually outdoors, and of course, Mother Nature is welcoming us with a beautiful spring shower. We're here at the Tudor Place Historic House and Gardens in Georgetown, and for me, it's not only a special occasion to be here at Tudor Place and to be here with our guests, but to also welcome one of my very best friends and one of the area's most notorious, most fabulous chefs and inn owners, and Patrick O'Connell.
Thank you, Carol. It's been a while since I've been called notorious, but,
but we
I'll
know
take
you
it.
are. And I actually did the math, Patrick, and I want you to know that just because we've known each other for almost 40 years doesn't mean I'm going to go soft on you.
You never, I would never imagine you'd go soft on anybody,
But on the other hand,
Carol.
I probably am going to go soft on you.
That would be out of character if you did.
We're going to talk about many things, but in particular, we're here to celebrate your new book. It's called The Inn at Little Washington, A Magnificent Obsession. And it is you've done a few books now. And this is I thought of it as sort of an architectural and business memoir with some recipes.
A sort of retrospective of the 37-year transformation of the garage into whatever it is now.
Whatever it is now.
But hopefully an inspirational story as well.
If you love design, if you love how you get things done, I mean, if you've ever hired a contractor in your life, you're going to want to read this book. If you've ever had an architect, if you've ever worked with an interior designer, you'll want to read this book. But beyond that, the Inn at Little Washington is so special to so many people in the Washington area and across the country and now around the world. You read this and it will revive all your own memories of being there, and if you haven't been there, you'll want to go. So before I drop it, I will relinquish it to Mary, and I want to thank Mary Michael Watcher for helping us so much, and Leslie Bueller for getting this done, and hopefully we won't get washed away. Patrick, as I said, I've known you for 37 years, so is it okay if we go back to the beginning a little bit?
Well, you can still remember back that far?
Well, a little bit. I tell you the parts I remember are usually after hours, but we won't now. But I think one of the things that was fun for me in reading the book was being reminded that as grand and elegant and glorious as the inn is now, you didn't open grand, you opened good, but you didn't open grand. It was really a very humble start. And I thought maybe you would talk a little bit about this place you found, this location you found, and the condition you found it in, and what you had to do to get it going.
We were living in an unheated farmhouse, running a catering business with no employees. And every time we had a gig, we would go to a place called the Free State, which was a hippie commune in the woods. And we would sort of holler into the woods, "Hello, any hippies home?" And some of them lived in dugouts. Life was very different in that era, and you could make a nice home for yourself by digging a hole in the ground about the size of a coffin, and then finding a piece of corrugated roofing that you would pull over top of you, and if you covered that with leaves, you were completely invisible. And your invisibility is your security. So you would just get in at night, pull your lid across, have a nice sleep, and get up in the morning and start foraging. So
how close was this to your home? Or was this your home?
It was a stone's throw.
And this is, and we should say
I only lived there for a short time before
we should put it, this is a little town called Syria, Virginia, which is at the base of the Blue Ridge.
Nearby,
So
and actually Nethers, the other side of the mountain. So when we would get together the correct number of potential waiters and servers and helpers, we would then take them to our house and give them a good bath in the river in the summer, and in the winter we'd heat up the water, and then we'd tie back their hair, for the boys ponytails, and for the girls whatever we could do. And in the attic, I had a collection of white shirts and black trousers that I bought at Goodwill. And then we'd fit them up and we'd take them to the party. And we'd arrive at some glorious palatial mansion. They'd get out of our van, and sometimes you'd see them walking down with the tray of hors d'oeuvres. I'd be in the kitchen, and they'd walk down, and they'd just...
They couldn't believe what they were seeing. They dropped the
thought
tray.
they had taken the wrong medication.
And one of your, I think one of your most vital clients then, who really helped get you started, was the columnist and TV commentator James J. Kilpatrick,
Yes,
right?
yes,
Wasn't he very,
lovely, wonderful,
very important
wonderful man, and of course politically about as far the other side as he possibly could be.
But business is business.
That's right. A friend was hitchhiking into Washington, and James Kilpatrick, the columnist, pulled over and gave him a ride. And the friend was from the Free State. And Kilpatrick said, I'm looking for somebody to take care of my farm, a couple of lawn boys. And so when we met up with the friend, he said, I've got a job for you. Kilpatrick is looking for a couple of lawn boys. And I think he was paying $2.15 an hour, which was not bad.
No,
It could go a long way.
talking a long time ago.
So we were the best damn lawn boys he'd ever had. He confessed that later. And we got to know the family well. And one day I was burying a groundhog in the garden, and Mrs. Kilpatrick...
I said humble beginnings.
Well, if she hadn't been there, we would have cooked the groundhog.
Humbler beginnings.
But we were burying it, and she started to talk about a difficulty she was having. She was entertaining that night. She was having trouble with her paella. So I began coaching her on how to get her paella right, and suddenly she realized, oh my God, he doesn't belong in the garden. He can come to the big house. So we started entertaining. We started catering for them, and then they passed us around to 50
Do you remember
or
the
so
first
other events.
occasion you did for them?
I did. It was the christening of their grandchild.
Yeah.
And I made a watercress soup that came from a little patch, a little creek on their property.
Yeah.
And he just adored being able to show off something that was wild, that grew right there. So nothing has really changed. We're still out foraging.
But we should also point out that at the time you were doing this, you and Reinhardt Lynch, who was your partner then, you had day jobs. You were actually commuting into Auberge Chez Francois in Great Falls.
That was later.
That was later?
That was later, after we made the commitment to
Food.
foolishly open a restaurant.
To stop burying groundhogs.
Well, yeah, it took a few years of
Catering.
Catering, yeah. And the last party was for Elizabeth Taylor when she married John Warner in Middleburg. And at that point, we sort of reached a crossroads.
It's a good jumping off point. Did you make fried chicken?
No, poached salmon. And she loved it and came back for seconds, and we
thirds.
forged, and thirds.
So what year is this? This was
I have
like...
lost track of all years,
Okay,
Carol, but
yeah.
all I know is that we opened in 1978. The
remember.
staff reminds me of that every night.
Well, and I remember you opening in 1978 because while this wasn't your first review, we will get to your first review, but your second review, my husband and I would go out to visit my parents in Warrenton, and one day my mother said, you two like to go eat in real fancy restaurants. Here's this from the Washington Post, and it was a story that Phyllis Richmond had written. I think it was on the front of their weekend section.
It was. What a memory.
What a memory. And well, because it was such a great memory. And so we said, yeah, sure, we'll go. And I don't know, I think that was the beginning of who knows how many visits, but we made the drive.
Once a week. You used to come once a week. Dinner was $4.95.
I want to just describe my
You all
memories.
missed out.
There, you walked into, the building was even though I know it was a former garage, it was not an unattractive building. It had a nice bone structure.
High
even
ceilings.
then,
Yeah.
you know, even from the street, you know, it stood apart from the rest of the buildings around it.
Yeah, it was more of a carriage house garage.
But it was,
Yeah.
you know, it was not off-putting, I should say.
No, it did have an outhouse. We didn't feature that at the time.
But the thing I remember the most is that we walked through a basket shop.
You did.
We go, like, are we at the restaurant? And they'd say, no, just keep going. And then
You'll find it eventually.
And you've sort of replicated that, at least that direction with the entryway you have now, though you don't have baskets for sale all over the place. But then you pivoted to the right, and you turned, and there was this very pretty dining room with baskets hanging over the
Yes.
tables that kind of had a certain synergy there. And am I correct if I remember there were paper placemats?
There were.
Okay.
There definitely were. But I had all the tables made by a local furniture
Right, and you had-
manufacturer.
and
Floor,
you
beautiful
had-
cherry tables. We wanted to show them off, and we couldn't afford tablecloths.
And you
there
had
was
Pottery
nobody.
Barn china. Blue
No,
and white.
we
It
bought the
wasn't-
china from Costin's Sirloin Room when they burned down
Oh, okay, that's even better.
downtown. They
Right.
had gorgeous blue and white china. We bought it all at the fire sale, a true fire sale.
No, really. This is all, and I remember this too. My favorite dish was a dish called veal Shenandoah.
Oh, yeah.
And he probably wouldn't like me to tell you this, but you served it with, it was a very nicely pounded veal.
Yes.
And you served it with DiCecco wheel pastas, remember that?
You've got an incredible memory.
But it had the most amazing
food.
sauce. No, it had the most amazing sauce, you know, and that was the transcendent part.
Well, the transcendent part was developing a regional cuisine when nobody even thought that way. And the fancy French restaurants in Washington, if you were unlucky enough to be a vegetarian, were still opening a can of petit pois, the little peas, and baby carrots. And you'd get some mashed potatoes, some baby carrots, and some baby peas from the can, and live
No
happily
matter
ever
what you
after.
ordered, no matter what you ordered,
Yeah,
no matter
and then
what the
everybody got the
protein
same
was.
things. Exactly.
That's the same.
Exactly.
And but I remember this. I remember the veal Shenandoah was $11.
That was when it was already
That's when
moving
you
up.
hiked the prices. but still, the thing is that as I said, it may not have been as grand as it was now, but it was special and it was so good. And the thing that I remember loving about you as I got to know you and Reinhardt was you were doing it all yourselves. You were doing
Yeah.
it all.
Yeah.
I mean, you were 24/7 before we had a name for it. And I remember we'd often eat late, and you would be in the kitchen after all the guests left, by yourself, starting on everything for the
Right.
next day, you know?
One time the White House chef came for a visit, and he came in the kitchen to thank me and say a good night or whatever, and I was at the pot sink.
You said,
Up
"What
to
are
my
you doing?"
elbows in suds.
Well, I mean, but really, don't you feel that that doing it that way is what's made it such a rich experience for you and the patrons?
Well, it's pretty wonderful to be able to do every single task in the business yourself and to know how to do it. So for years, I always said, all I'm looking for is staff members who can do their job better than I can do their job.
Yeah.
And it's taken a long time to find people who can replace the way you used to do
Well,
things.
it's so different now because
there's
then you were
140
driving
people
up
now.
and down the back roads looking for people you could hire.
Right,
Now they're lining up at the front door from all over the world saying, "Can I come work for you?"
It's been a nice change.
It's a nice change. But you know, I
They
think
all have a bathtub. That was on the early application. It was for our internal use. It says "smiles easily?" and "do you have a bathtub?" But we found out that even being that specific, people were still capable of lying. One girl
well.
claimed that she
restaurant
did,
business.
and another girl said, "Yeah, but she didn't tell you it was out in her backyard, dumped there."
do you who's the staffer who's been with you the longest?
We have a a dining room manager who's been there 22 years, and 3 of his sons are now working there, and that's wonderfully rewarding.
Yeah.
And we're seeing a lot of third-generation guests,
Oh my God.
which is pretty remarkable also, and very charming. The tradition just keeps on in the family.
Yeah, I not only had my prenuptial dinner there, but we also had my son's 21st birthday there. Thanks to you, Spencer. Is
There you go,
Spencer and Patrick
it won't
are,
be long before.
let's not go there. Patrick was the. Well, you don't mind if I say this? My
No.
bridesmaid.
What?
He was the witness at my wedding. He and Reinhardt were the witness at my wedding, and also godparents to my son. So every pivotal family event has been spent there. But I wanted to go back to a little bit to the beginning for just one more moment, and that is because I think it's really interesting that you weren't necessarily classically trained. You're very much a self-taught genius chef. It was so. How did you find cooking? How did it enter your life? Was it at home in Mama's kitchen? Was it?
Well, the first job I ever had was in a restaurant at age 15.
Where?
In Southern Maryland. It was called Mr. H Hamburgers.
Okay.
And Mr. H, Mr. Hardesty, was a hardcore, old, tough restaurant guy. And everything was made from scratch. McDonald's had not yet opened. He took us one night on a field trip to the nearby town where McDonald's had just opened. And we all got around the back window. There were about 5 people working for him. And he started pointing in the window and saying, "Garbage! It's garbage! It's all garbage!" And so then he got
And the message was?
then he got a burger for each of us. And he said, "Taste it!" And then he tasted his and he went, "It's garbage!"
Yeah.
We thought it was delicious.
Yeah, exactly.
We weren't sure whether to gobble it right up or spit it out also. So we sort of timidly took a few more bites. But it was at a time when he was still hand cutting the French fries. He was making the tartar sauce. He was, dipping the onion rings and this sort of thing.
And
it was
you were
big,
learning.
Big change.
You were learning what it meant to make it from scratch.
Exactly. But it wasn't so much, I didn't know that it was about food at that time. For me, it was about restaurant people. And they were the most eccentrically wonderful people that they were all nutcases.
Yeah, that hasn't changed, has it?
It hasn't changed a bit. They were living in a different sort of mental state than the normal people. And it was a speeded up reality. It was always faster than real time. And it was addictive, absolutely addictive. So I kept working at restaurants all through college. I actually, the second summer, went back to Mr. H, and I said, "I'd like my job back." And he said, "You can't work here, kid. You got to go to a better place." And he made a call to a friend who had tablecloths, and I went to a real restaurant. My parents thought, my life was ruined. And
Yeah. Well, it's scary. I mean, who knew, right? I mean, it wouldn't be much different if you'd come home and said, "I'm going off to be an actor."
This was a little sleazier.
Okay, but just as but you were near
You
home.
came home needing a good shower, generally.
So you continued to live at home as you began your career. When were you able to move out?
I went to university because you had to do it, and I got an acting scholarship to Catholic University. And I went thinking I'd fall in love with that. But the whole time I was at school, I was working in restaurants. And it felt as though the theater just wasn't nearly as exciting as living theater in a restaurant. The improv of having to deal with the unknown every night.
But did that training serve you? Do you feel sometimes that being a chef is not unlike being a director? And a performer?
I think the wonderful thing, if you can do it, is to bring all of your interests, all of your skills together and be able to use all of them. And that's what I find so satisfying about what I do now, is that, yes, I am a director, a producer, an artist,
You're
a chef.
everything now, yeah.
Yeah. And if you get bored with one arena, you just move into another.
Yeah, I mean, because not to time travel too much, but one of the things I think that's very interesting about your story is that you and Reinhardt started the business together and you were partners, and that lasted for a very long time, and that at a certain point you went your separate ways, and there you were with the inn all on your own. And that had to be, I wonder if that was, I imagine it was both scary and liberating.
It was more incremental than the outside world may have
Perceived
viewed
it,
it.
yeah.
Yes, it was kind of happening gradually anyway. But it was exhilarating as well.
Yeah, and I think my personal opinion is I thought it just got better and better. And I didn't see the little wheels and the pulleys anymore, but I knew that you had to become not just the chef anymore, but so much more. You know, you were the owner, you were the business impresario.
You had to begin thinking about money for the first time.
Yeah, well, that's, yeah, I know. I thought, well,
You had to take out a very hefty loan.
But again, to time travel back, so you and Reinhardt open the inn. You've got your paper placemats. You've got your basket shop. It's humble, but it's great. And I don't know that you expected this, but John Rawson of the Washington Star shows up. And I don't know if any of you remember the newspaper. We used to have multiple newspapers in this town, and the Evening Star was a very competitive newspaper with the Washington Post, especially in regard to restaurant coverage. And their restaurant critic, John Rawson, shows up and kind of warns you, right?
He actually asked to meet me after he had dined, and he said,
Did you know he was there? Did you know a critic was in the house?
The weirdest thing happened. I would answer the phone during the day. Well, we didn't have employees. So what else are you going to do? So I had a very long cord, and I could crook it right under here.
Did you put it on hold and say, oh, let me get someone, and then
we didn't have a hold button.
I believe you.
So I just cooked with the phone right here. And someone called, and he said, I'd like to make a dinner reservation for 2 people, and it was at 5 o'clock. And I just ran over and took the name down. And then I thought, this is a critic.
Well, how did you
Probably
know that?
because I didn't recognize his accent. In those days, generally you recognized at least 3/4 of the people by their voice or their
Okay.
southern accents.
So this sounded like somebody who was coming from the big city.
I said to Reinhardt, there's a critic coming Wednesday night. And he said, why do you think that? I just know it. What time is he coming? I said, 5 o'clock. You're out of your mind. A critic wouldn't eat at 5 o'clock. So we open, nobody's there. He walks in, and 2 gentlemen. We did sort of begin to put it together that
Well,
it was
this was
probably
before
John
the internet. It's not like you
Oh,
could
yeah,
go
you
and take a
can't.
picture of
No,
somebody
no
and
way.
then put it on the internet and see who it is.
But anyway, we fed him, and at the end of the dinner, he asked if he could meet me, and he said, I'd never do this, ever, ever, ever. But in this case, I have to ask if you really want me to write this review. And I said, well, you know, it would be lovely if people knew we were here, and more people found out about us. So the short answer is yes, please. And he said, no. The reason I'm asking is if I write the review, I'm going to say this place is fantastic, and it might change your whole life. And
oh, that's such a wonderful moment.
I'm just ambivalent and not too sure about it. I said, oh, please.
Yeah.
By all means, right away.
Yeah.
So I remember my parents were very skeptical about this operation, as they would be probably about any offspring, because, you know, you grow up, they don't know you can do anything. They don't imagine you can. And my mother, as they would say in the country, bless her heart, always said, well, dear, if things don't work out as planned, you can always sell that wonderful granola you make door to door. And I said, yes, I can.
So what did they do when they saw the review?
Well, the review came out, and my mother read it to my father in bed, and they both cried.
Aww.
And I thought, as you should.
Yes.
And then shortly afterwards, my father came up and was having dinner. And the dessert menu was put down in front of him, and he said to the waiter, "Where the hell's Pat buy all these desserts way out here?"
I hope he didn't say that too loud. Because I actually remember being in the kitchen with you, helping you make white chocolate mousse, and that was so much fun. And then you took it off the menu because, I don't know,
Somebody else started offering
You
it.
evolved. We'll just say you evolved,
We
but
did.
I miss
You
it.
have to take certain things off the menu because they become so popular, that's all people buy. And
Really?
it impedes your ability
Really?
to change. That's how it works. Yeah.
Okay, so that's one thing that affects the menu. How do food trends affect the menu?
Well, everything affects everything.
Well, for example, 37 years ago, you didn't have a vegetarian menu.
No, we
Today
didn't.
you have to, right?
Yes, yes, sure. Demand. Yeah, you respond to demand. Yeah.
Do you fall in love? Okay, so I'm going to get. You and Reinhardt open the inn, you get this great review. Phyllis Richmond comes, you get another great review, and sort of like the build it, they will come, everybody came. And what you start doing, what you two start doing, which I always thought was really intriguing, and you started, you'd close for a month back then in January, and you two would go off to Europe, and you would go to all the greatest restaurants and hotels in the world. And
Whether
Europe
we
to
could
start,
afford
but
it
the
or
whole
not.
world.
Yes,
You went. And I believe you would even, if you could get in the kitchen and do a stage, you would.
And it was probably the most intelligent thing we ever did, and it's always the advice I give young people who want to go into the restaurant business or open their own, is develop reference points, get out and see the best. And I always get frustrated when I see a sign, best hamburger in Charlottesville. And why stop there? Why not?
Yeah.
Why limit yourself? Why not be the best in the state of Virginia, and why not aim for the best in the world? And I think it's important to know who is doing the best of anything.
Right.
And to, instead of it shutting you down, for me it always encouraged me to know that if a human being could accomplish that it was possible.
It seemed to me, too, what I remember is you would come back from these trips and you couldn't wait to get in the kitchen. You know, this is why I'm saying about how menus evolve. You couldn't wait to get in the kitchen and do things that you'd experienced. And then there'd be little elements of change in the decor also, because you would come back sort of infused and embellished by the experience. It was always raising you up.
Yeah, well, it was developing that sort of measuring stick with the best in the world, particularly the greatest restaurants in France, and then later in the British country house hotels, and seeing how far short you fell of that sort of standard. So being able to do that on an annual basis was terrific, because you were able to shorten the gap and see tangibly what was happening until you kind of made full circle. And then some of the great chefs of Europe were sending their offspring to work with us in the kitchen.
What was wonderful too about those trips is that, and it says a lot about you, is that you weren't intimidated. You came back saying, we can do this. We can do this too. We can do it right here in this little town that doesn't even have liquor license yet, you know?
Given enough time,
but I'm saying that you had that vision.
Yes, again, you
Or was it
would,
stubbornness?
my mother said I didn't have a very good grasp on reality.
Well, that's another story.
And that can be very helpful.
Yeah, but I mean, to think that to always come back and reinvest and say, we can do this, we can do this. And I should point out, you were in a town where the reception wasn't always friendly.
I knew you'd get to that part.
No, I'm not. There's a lot I'm not going to get to there, because I think it's so insular that it's not, relevant to the bigger picture of your story. Except that you were always having to deal with one kind of opposition or another.
Yeah.
That's the whole 37 years.
I sometimes think of the inn as a rare, exotic desert plant that thrives in horrible soil.
But
because it really shouldn't be there. and there's no earthly reason that it happened there, except that I feel that that's my spot in the universe.
Yeah.
And I have this belief that every human being has a geographical, physical spot that if they can find it, everything will fall into place for them. They feel right. It's a very primitive notion, but for me, I feel it very strongly. As soon as I get back there tonight, I feel like, oh, I'm
You're
safe.
home. Yeah. Well, because really, you don't live literally above the store, but you almost do because you live just down the street. You're hailing distance
I have
of
room
every
service.
emergency
Yeah,
and crisis.
room service. It's important.
But did you ever? Was there ever a time when you and Reinhardt or you alone said, "This isn't worth it. Let's just pull up stakes and get out of here. We can move this in anywhere we want to."
There were rare moments when we investigated other alternative avenues.
Tell us one. Tell us one other avenue you investigated.
Well, we had a crazy lawyer at one time who had so many squabbles with the town. They kept passing illegal ordinances to prevent us from
Growing.
From growing. Yeah, they would always say.
And raising their property values.
Exactly. Everything you've done so far has been, that's okay, but just don't do anything else. It's all fine right now.
But stop.
Just please stop. So he said he had a great idea that we would buy attractive land about 15 minutes closer into the city before you reached Little Washington.
Same county, still
Same
Rappahannock.
county, Rappahannock County. And we had accidentally named the town Little Washington. Its real name is Washington, Virginia. Its postal
That's
address
another
is
one of the
Washington,
controversies
Virginia.
you created.
So we would simply create on 500 acres Little Washington. Sign out on the highway. And before you ever got to what you thought was Little Washington,
Yeah. You said crazy lawyer.
you'd be in our Little Washington. We'd have a little post office eventually, and that would be a solution. But the squabbles, the battles, have been, they've had value.
You've been able to prove you care. You know, you don't.
There's that. There's that. It's strengthening in an odd way. It's not bad to have obstacles. You learn how to move around them, to overcome them. Yeah.
Because I think it's something you say in your book, or maybe it was Joyce says it in the book, but that you know this was the unlikeliest place for a 5-star inn. But on the other hand, I think, isn't it in some ways the likeliest place? I mean, think of what you've been able to do there.
Well, not too many places would have afforded you the opportunity to do as much as we have and incorporate the natural healing qualities of the region and the area.
How many buildings do you have now?
Not all of them are habitable, or some of them, many of them should have been torn down.
How many rooms do you have
we have
now?
20 buildings and 24 rooms.
And you started out with
are very small.
7 rooms or 12 rooms?
We started out with 8 rooms.
8 rooms, okay.
At the we started out with no
in the
rooms.
inn itself,
we were
right,
first
right.
a restaurant, then we were a restaurant with rooms, then we became a sort of country house hotel, and now we're a bigger country house hotel.
I keep waiting for
with
you
a
to
little
get
farm.
town hall so that you can become the town spa. You know, that's the whole block. But
In time, we just have to be
another
patient.
story.
Yes,
That's another
it
story.
is.
I want to talk about some names and people. I think chiefly, the people that and they're so fondly in your book. Well, one fondly, one eccentrically, but Albert Hinckley, the eccentric one, Joyce, the fun one. But why are these two people so critically important?
Well, they sort of helped us launch a direction. Albert Hinckley was a local architect from a nearby town of Warrenton. And we called on him when we purchased the building at the end of the first year of operating, and told him we would like to turn it into a real inn with guest rooms. At that time, we were occupying one room of the old garage, and we had a kitchen on the rear. And he said the only time he'd ever been in that town, his car had broken down at that intersection, and he looked out his window and he said, "Oh, hell, why did I have to break down in front of such an ugly building?"
Aww.
And so I had accumulated a bunch of pictures out of Arc Digest at the time to kind of inspire him, and he just said, "Well, I hope you've got a rich uncle." And he started, and he came up with some brilliant ideas. He had been a ship designer, and he had wonderful reference points because he spent a lot of time in Europe at great hotels. So I looked at the drawings and I said, "But what sort of thoughts do you have about color?" And he said, "Well, white. And I said, "Everything white?" And he said, "Yes,
yeah.
white."
Yeah.
And I said, "That's just not going to work." And he said, "Well, if pushed, I could go to putty." And I said, "We're going to have to keep pushing." So he said, "All right, if you're serious about this, I have a friend in London who's absolutely mad, and if you like, we'll see if she has any thoughts." So he sent a blueprint to her, and she came up with her first rendering.
This is Joyce.
This is Joyce. Mm-hmm. We had never met her or whatever, and it looked like something out of Downton Abbey, sort of an Irish country house mansion. It was the entryway with the high ceiling. And we were gaga, and of course had to have it.
And Patrick, and yet it was so you know? I mean, you must have
Yes.
you must have looked at it and gone, "This came out of my brain somehow, and I don't even know this woman."
Well, we were on the same page.
You really
from
were.
the very first. And then 35 years later, she was just over, and we've just completed
I know. She was
6 more rooms, and she's just starting the restorations of the first generation of rooms.
She said something
At
really
85.
wonderful, I thought, too, that she was, when she was designing what the restaurant would look like in the rooms, that she felt that her mandate was to make something that people were going to treasure, that this was an experience that they were going to treasure. And I don't know that restaurants think of that enough.
Or permanence. Most restaurants these days are designed and intended to last 3 years. And so there isn't the possibility of making an investment that is for decades.
Yeah.
And usually the property is not owned. It's very difficult to own the
Well,
space.
you did this with Albert and Joyce, a marvelous collaboration, and the accolades then just started, flowing in. I mean, you started winning every possible award and getting honored with all kinds of invitations to prepare meals for royalty, presidents. You had chefs from all over the world coming to dine with you. But I want you to tell a story, and I hope you don't find me being too indiscreet, but I just think it's one of the best stories ever about the inn. And if you don't want to do it, that's okay. But I think that enough time has passed. When Warren Beatty and his wife came to dinner.
Nothing bad happened.
Nothing bad happened. It was wonderful what happened. Okay, do you want me to prompt you? I'm going to prompt you a little, because I don't think this is indiscreet.
No, but maybe it was. They wanted
You
to come
were
for
living
one.
in your own house.
Right,
You were
right,
living
right.
in the Claiborne house.
Right.
And it was your day off. And you get a phone call from Warren Beatty's plane. His pilot has called, and they're coming, and they want to come stay at the inn because he wants to take his kids to see
Right.
the family plot outside Front Royal.
Right.
And you and Reinhardt have your staff move every single thing of yours out of that house.
That's 5-star service, Carol.
And Warren Beatty and Annette Bening arrive, and they don't even know it's your home.
But they were supposed to stay one night. But they were having.
Keep going.
and
Exactly. Keep going. This is a great story.
Fortunately, we had a basement. We put a lot of things downstairs and locked it all up.
You moved back into your mud huts.
Practically. No, I took one change of clothes, one underwear, whatever, and put it in a little duffel bag. And then we went off to the country, practically to the mud hut, an old farmhouse that we had not fixed up. And then we came into work and were told that they were having such a wonderful time, they'd like to stay another night. And I thought, I only have one change of underwear. That's impossible. And then I thought, I can make do. And so that day passed. They came to dinner. They were just enthralled, and they decided to stay another night. At which point it was like, okay, Warren.
Yeah, we're getting to know you well enough now.
His wife, Annette, was walking with the children down the street, and somebody started a conversation, and she found out that was actually our house. So she came to dinner that night and said, I just discovered that we're staying in your house. And I said, oh. And she said, well, don't worry. I said to the children, stop coloring on the wallpaper.
That story does define service, though, I must say. Now, you then took that house. You did move back into it. But then you eventually turned it into probably your most prominent guest house, which you named after one of your favorite people.
Yes,
Craig Claiborne.
Craig Claiborne. And that's why the house got finished in the first place. Before we lived there, Craig used to call and say he was coming down. And
this is the New York Times restaurant critic, and he was God.
He was God. He had authored 28 cookbooks at the time. And he had begun writing about European chefs who he was discovering for the Times. And their careers would change enormously, and Americans would flock over to see what they were doing. And it was so well liked that he decided to focus on American chefs. And so he came to us, and he really put us on the map. There was a full-page story in the New York Times, and things
bigger map, yeah.
The bigger map. Mm-hmm. It kind of created an international presence. So when he would call and say he was coming, he didn't ask if we had any space. So he called once and said he was coming down for his birthday, and it turned out it was his 60th birthday. And I looked through his autobiography and recollected that his 50th was photographed in the book, and he had 50 of the greatest chefs in France cook for him on the SS France. So I thought, and this is the 60th? So this house that we're talking about, which is on the cover of the book, was under construction. But it was a long way off. It was under country construction, and they get it done when they get it done. So I went over to the guys and I said, we're going to be finishing this project in 3 weeks. And everybody had a hearty laugh. And then I said, no, it's really happening. We have a guest coming in here in 3 weeks. It had sheetrock up, but not much else. And so we went into overdrive. We finished the whole thing, and we turned it into a replica of his Mississippi home in Sunflower, Mississippi.
Oh, that's fun.
And we got photographs of his mother and his father, and we blew them up and made them into portraits. And just sort of surprised him and delighted him with the idea that he was coming home. So he said he had the greatest birthday of his life, and that he was going to come every year for the rest of his life for his birthday, which was a mixed blessing, because we had to keep upping the ante. But he did until his 70th, and that was hosted by the Prince of Monaco and the royal family, and he got to invite 50 of his favorite chefs there. It was a 3-day extravaganza with no budget. And then he moved on to other worlds.
But his memory lives at the end.
Well,
in
it
the
does,
most beautiful
because
way.
one day I said to a boy in the kitchen who was making my lunch, just get the recipe out of Craig Claiborne's book. And he said, who? And I said, Craig Claiborne. And he said, I'm sorry, I don't know who that is. I said, well, where'd you go to culinary school? He said, the CIA. I said, they have a library named after him. He wrote 28 books. He's only been dead 6 years. How can you not remember him? And he said, I never heard of him. I'm sorry. And so I thought we should do something in our own little way to keep his memory alive. Yeah. So we started that with his house, and people loved it. We filled it with memorabilia and pictures and all of his books. And we continued it with other American culinary pioneers. So all the rooms in the inn which have been stayed in by a culinary pioneer are named in their honor. and people kind of love it because Julia Child's been there. Every major great chef living and dead.
Jean-Georges,
Jean-Louis Paladin, Alice
Jean-Louis,
Waters.
may he rest in peace.
And so it helps people understand that the inn has intersected with so many of these pioneers.
Some quick questions before we run out of time. When was the last time you went to a book for a recipe?
A book for a recipe? That's an interesting question. I can't remember.
It's okay, it's a fair answer. Yeah. Could have been How to Cook Squirrel from some 18th century tome. I don't know, but I just wondered if
Not
you...
that I love recipes, I love reading recipes, but generally you find cooks aren't good recipe readers. So you just sort of look at it and you say, I got it, but then you kind of invent it yourself. Yeah.
When was the last time you were surprised by an ingredient?
By an ingredient. Well, I'm surprised every day by
But
something.
that's what keeps it fresh and changing, right? Something comes along that nobody was touching before, and all of a sudden it's...
Yeah, well, sometimes you're surprised with the extraordinary quality of an ingredient, and everything's new again. It happens once a day.
What was the last great meal you had?
Well, I was out late Tuesday night in D.C., and everything has closed, and I'm coming along Route 50, and I swing off into a shopping mall, and there's this little Chinese hole in the wall, and it says, it's flashing open, open.
You love Chinese food. Was this Peter Chang's by any chance?
And then I thought, this has got to be a drug dealer. No people inside. And the sign just said, XO, XO. And I said, porn?
All purpose.
Porn, drugs, and Chinese food, what could be better? So I went in, and I ordered soy sauce chicken, which I used to make, and I love steamed chicken. I wanted something healthy. And candid with tofu. And it just straightened my whole head out. It just set me right. It was exactly what I needed right at that moment. It was pure, it was good, it was authentic, clean. And what it illustrates is that a great meal is the perfect thing at the moment when you need it.
Yeah.
And it's continually changing. People always say, what is your favorite restaurant? Well, it depends on who I'm with, what the moment is. And at that moment,
Your palate.
that was my favorite restaurant in Washington. XO.
XOXO.
I don't know the name of it, but if you're just, it's the only thing that has open, XO.
Well, you've always been drawn to Chinese food as that kind of fugue between your work week and everything else. You've always liked to go like Peking gourmet. And
well, if you eat anything resembling your own, even the ingredients that you work with every day, your critical faculty goes on, and you begin evaluating it and trying to improve it in your mind.
How many times have investors come to you and said, we want to help you open restaurants all over the country like every other famous celebrity chef?
It happens. One night a man came in and he said, I'd like to open 3 of these with you. And I said, just 3? Meanwhile, I was just out of the pot sink, still just cooking as fast as I could. And I looked at him with some amusement, and he said, well, if you don't want to come in with me, I'll do it myself. 3 little inns, go for it.
But all these, most of these men and women who you've named rooms after, especially chefs that are still active now, have multiple restaurants, and it's a trend, it's a thing. Do you ever envy them or not?
Well, we have secret discussions from time to time, and the truth is they envy me.
I know. Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, But Relais and Chateau sort of did that for you, didn't it? I often thought that by becoming involved with Relais and Chateau, and you're high up in the hierarchy, and you're traveling all over the world to do their events and check out places, that sort of does that Jones, where you get to go off to other restaurants and hotels and
Oh,
have a
I see a
proprietary
lot.
role?
I'm not living in a well by any means.
Yeah, you travel a lot.
And there's tremendous stimulation. I'm the president of the North American
Right.
Relais and Chateau group. So we have chef meetings all the time, and so I feel very plugged in. I'm, going to Ireland on Sunday, and I'm going to Vienna the following week for a meeting. But what we're doing is very opposite from what the American culture is embracing. Our reason for being is not primarily financial. It's a love of the craft and of serving people and taking care of people and the passion that goes with it. And our culture today, unfortunately, seems to measure everything in dollars. Film is rated on how much it made. Chefs are now thought of as the biggest grossing, Wolfgang Puck, 250 million or whatever.
Yeah.
So it's a bit skewed. So we've always embraced a kind of European style where something evolves and grows, deep roots, and gives you the sense that you're visiting someone's home.
Yeah.
And
It's got a
strong
Williamsburg
sense of
quality
place.
too, in the way. It's very 18th century village feeling. But so you're now, what anniversary did you just celebrate? Was it the 40th?
No, we haven't turned 40 yet, Carol. Don't rush it.
I've only known you 37 years.
That's right. We have just entered our 37th year.
37th year.
Yeah.
And any big plans we should know about?
So many.
No, but I mean,
many.
when is the pool opening up, I want to know when I can come out and sit by the pool. And the ice skating rink I always wanted you to do. No, but I think I did read that you're going to try a luncheon place.
We are.
When does that open up?
We have a wonderful space that overlooks a big meadow. We never pin a particular
I won't
date
hold you
on
down
things,
on that. I won't
soon,
hold you down
soon.
on that.
Soon enough.
This has been wonderful. I love you. I don't think I've said that to any guests in 13 years before. I'm sorry that I froze you to death and you to death. You're a wonderful audience. I want to thank Tudor Place. I want to thank Susan Gage Caterers. Patrick, you're a doll. Another 37 years, please.
We'll do this again in 37 years.
In the Caribbean. Thank you all very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mwah.